Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Alleviate Capacity Issues with Tech-Enabled Outsourcing Services. First and foremost, we hope that you and your loved ones are happy, healthy, and staying safe. For today's webinar, Wolters Kluwer, Ray Barlow, Director of Outsource Operations, and David Harris, Tax Manager, will discuss how leveraging Expatax will enable your firm to receive the tax expertise and capacity needed to support in-house staff during peak season compression. Wolters Kluwer CCH is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer one CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 5 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you'll need to participate in 3 of them in order to receive CPE credit. If you have experienced any technical difficulties when trying to submit your poll response, please make sure you let us know in the questions pane of the control panel. This way we can record your answer manually. Your certificate will be sent to the email used to register for the webinar within 5 business days after the session. If you do not receive your certificate, please email marketing@xcmsolutions.com. Please note CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. You will also have the opportunity to complete a survey about the webinar, our content, learning objectives, and more at the end of the presentation. The survey will also be sent to you in a follow-up email. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in this survey so we can continue to deliver meaningful content in future presentations. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Ray Barlow and David Harris.
Thanks, Alyssa, and welcome everyone to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Ray Barlow. I'm the Director of Outsource Operations here at Wolters Kluwer. I've been in the accounting industry for many years, working within several organizations, and my primary responsibility is to make sure our outsourcing business is moving forward and doing what it needs to do. I'm joined today by Dave Harris. Dave, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ray. David Harris, Tax Manager of Tax Compliance here at CCH and Wolters Kluwer. Been with this company for 7 years now. Prior to that, worked in a public CPA firm, working in the high net worth and real estate partnership area. I was a user of Expatax services outsourcing myself, and now I act as the liaison between firms in the US and to the offshore teams for Expatax. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Dave. So what we're going to talk about today is how we would help firms address the current capacity issues that so many firms are having relative to tax season and getting the tax work done. So our agenda for today is going to be, first, we're going to talk about Expatax services for accounting firms. We'll talk a little bit about our background, how we got here. We'll dive into the trends in the industry. It's hard not to look at these trends and see how they're impacting so many of the decisions being made by firms that are looking at tax season this year. We'll talk about the benefits of tax outsourcing. Then Dave will jump in and talk about the preparation services. What does Expatax do and how do we do it? And then we'll finish up with a little bit about gaining firm buy-in, and of course the all-important 7216 consent form. And if we have time, we'd be happy to answer any questions. We're going to focus a lot today on international outsourcing. We do offer domestic outsourcing as well. So both of those options are on the table, but today's focus is going to be primarily on international, which is our biggest operation, where most of the work that we do is internationally. It's probably for a lot of reasons. We've been doing it for a long time. And it provides two critical values. One is certainly it helps with compression during tax season and any capacity issues you might have. But secondly, it's also an economic value because of the costs are significantly lower than you might see in a domestic operation. So before I get started, I do want to talk about what happened a little over a year ago when Wolters Kluwer did purchase XCM Solutions. With that came a whole host of products, including our Expatax tax outsourcing, our CAS outsourcing, and of course, Dave came with that, and so did I. So all of us here on the call, including even Alyssa, we're all part of XCM when we came in from the acquisition. So the good news is we're all still here working through the Expatax business, expanding it, looking at ways to improve it each and every day. And if you look at the top right-hand corner, we've been doing this for quite a while. So we first started tax outsourcing in 2002. And if you want to know the background of XCM, when we began outsourcing in 2002, we needed an application to help move the work from the accounting office to our team in India and then back to our accounting office, to your accounting office. So we built this product called the Expatax Client Manager, or XCM. So XCM first started as a tool to help outsourcing work, and then later became a tool that helped firms manage their internal workflow as well. That's a little background there. What are the types of solutions we offer? Well, I mentioned today we offer both onshore and offshore tax processing. We also have the capability of do tax data conversions. If there are some difficult conversions that require a lot of work on the part of your staff to make those conversions happen, that may be things that don't necessarily convert in any of the desktop application conversion programs, we can help you there. We also offer CAS outsourcing, client accounting services, where we're helping firms with the accounting transactional work. We're helping some firms with audit. We're helping others doing some litigation support. So a lot of different things that our team in Expatax can handle. So let's talk a little bit about the trends in the industry. This is probably the most challenging piece of this, and that's what I'm referring to here is the ebb and flow of COVID-19. It just keeps, it's an ebb and flow. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. It's hard to really find a clear path out of this situation just now. And I was reading some articles the other day where firms are looking at this challenge, and the additional staffing challenges that are also part of this that may last 3 to 5 years. So it's certainly something that is real, and we have to address each and every day. We also think that going back to the way things used to be, right now anyways, is going to be a significant challenge. You might see some firms in that hybrid model where they've got some staff who are working from home a couple of days a week, going into the office a couple of days a week. I think that really is going to be here to stay, and that's part of another trend, which is firms really have accelerated their technology decisions, and especially around cloud technology. It's really difficult to be an effective firm in a remote environment if you're not in the cloud. Even as we look at our XCM workflow or any workflow tool that is in the cloud, working from a remote environment, being able to move the work seamlessly from staff to staff in that cloud environment is so much easier than trying to replicate a desktop environment throughout your entire firm. So clearly those decisions have really accelerated. It's no longer about cloud anymore. It's just table stakes now. But what else has happened also is because firms are so remote these days, the competition for staff is even more challenging. Firms from all over the country are reaching out and finding people all over the country. So it used to be if you were a New York City firm, you'd be recruiting people in the tri-state area to work, come into the office every day. Now with remote staff, those firms in New York are reaching out into other parts of the country and finding staff and offering staff positions and things like that. And that's happening in all over the place right now. So that's making it even more challenging to retain staff because of this really new remote work model that is clearly creating even more challenges for certain industries, and specifically also for the accounting profession. Another trend is RPA is working. We are using RPA. We are seeing significant benefits from RPA. RPA is working. And RPA is a robotic process automation. If you can find something that is very repetitive and you can apply RPA to it and make it and let bots handle it, it's very, very effective for us, and it's very effective for a lot of firms or a lot of companies that are offering it. In my opinion, AI still requires humans. It's not there yet. If you're going to have humans do the work, why not just have humans do the work rather than buy a platform that supposedly is all AI when it's really not. So it's really important to understand what you're buying into before you buy into it. And so we're not seeing AI as being there yet. The multi-generational workforce is clearly shifting. We're seeing more and more millennials as the predominant generation working in firms today, working in the industry in general. And as a result, when you look at the, and I'm not sure if anyone has really heard this before, but most likely you have, most people are talking about the great resignation of 2021. And so a lot of people are quitting their jobs. They're not going back to work. We don't know where they're going. But when you look at this from a generational perspective, the millennials are the prime generation of workers, but they're also what's driving this great resignation. Their ages group, the age group between 30 and 40 are the largest group that are resigning from firms, from industry, from companies all over, and those are the millennial generation. So we don't know why. We can guess what the reasons are, but right now this great resignation of 2021 is really being driven by the millennial workforce. There's also a change within accounting firms. This is a slide, it's pretty old now. It's probably 4 years old, maybe, since the first time it was used. I saw it being done by Barry Melanson at one of the meetings that I attended. And he was talking about the digital age transforming firms and really requiring firms to do more with RPA, with bots, and of course with outsourcing. And you know, some of the tasks that you would be typically doing and hiring staff to do are now being replaced by outsourcing companies or by leveraging RPA or bots wherever possible. And this is a trend that has accelerated into this year. I will be honest with you, the demand for our outsourcing services is unprecedented right now. I've never seen so many firms looking for, in general, outsourced services. That's good and bad. There's going to be a lot of people that are coming into this industry. I always compare this a little bit to the building industry. When building is at its height, a lot of people, whether they're experienced or not, come into the industry to be builders. And they may not be as good, they may not be very good at what they do, but they're seizing an opportunity. We're seeing that in the outsource industry right now. A lot of firms are showing up as outsourcing companies, but you really need to check their background and see how long they've been doing it, whether they're experienced in the accounting industry or not. And so that's the good and bad news about a significant uptick in demand for outsourced services. So we've reached our first poll. And Alyssa, why don't you take this one?
Great, thank you. I'm going to launch the first polling question. And the question is, what would you say is the #1 challenge managing your firm today? Recruiting and retaining talent, identifying areas for practice improvement and cost, raising profitability, attracting new clients, or cybersecurity and data privacy. As a reminder, this is the first of 5 polling questions. You'll need to participate in 3 of them in order to receive your CPE. And we'll give everyone just about 15 more seconds to complete the first polling question. Just about 5 more seconds, and we'll close the poll. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share the results, and I'll turn it back over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Alyssa. So 74% feel that recruiting and retaining talent is the #1 challenge. No surprise. I think the other area where a lot of firms still are looking for ways to improve their practice and make it more effective and do things that are more efficient, I'm sure. But the overwhelming winner today is recruiting, retaining talent. And what I find interesting is 0% of you folks are interested in attracting new clients. I think that's in line with what we're hearing. Most firms are looking to ways to maybe reduce their number of clients and increase their revenue per client. I saw a poll from CPA.com, I think, that said that on the CAS world, they've increased profitability or revenue by 20%, but the number of clients hasn't gone up. It's just that they're seeing a much higher revenue per client. And I think that aligns with what I'm seeing in this poll as well. So every year we follow the AFOT survey. We've been following this survey now for probably 3 or 4 years. And what's interesting is it talks again about some of the questions we just asked you in that survey. And so the question that was posed to this in this survey was, what's your number one challenge managing your firm today? And again, this year, 2020, the top challenge was recruiting and retention. What's interesting is we hadn't even reached the pinnacle of challenge yet in 2020. I haven't seen the 2021 poll yet, but I would imagine that this difference now between number one being recruiting and retention and number two raising profitability, whatever number two is going to be, I guarantee you this is going to expand even further. We're seeing a 10-point swing here. These used to always be pretty close, from year to year. Now we're seeing separation begin even before we reach this great resignation period that we're in right now. So I think it's clear that not just you folks on this call, but this is impacting firms all across the industry. Probably the only firms that aren't impacted by this are very small firms or sole practitioners, but firms beyond that are being impacted by the challenges that you see retaining and recruiting people. And one of the more challenging pieces of this is when you recruiting is difficult enough, when you finally find someone and you bring them on board and you get them ramped up and they're finally ready to be productive and start generating some revenue, they leave. And it's so depressing. It's so demoralizing because you literally have to start over again. And what we see is a lot of firms are coming to us and saying, we don't want to go through this again. Can you guys do this kind of work for us, whether it's tax work or client accounting services work? Can you guys do this kind of work for us? Because we don't want to have to deal with this again in the future. And that's what's driving this unprecedented demand for our outsourcing services. So let's talk quickly about some of the benefits. And before we do that, we have our second poll. Alyssa, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. I'm going to launch the second polling question. It's what experiences have you had with offshore outsourcing of tax and/or client accounting services? Currently leveraging remote staff for tax accounting work. Tried in the past, currently not using. Never tried but interested in learning more, or we presently do not have a need for outsourced services. And this is the second polling question out of 5. As a reminder, you'll need to participate in 3 of the 5 to get your CPE certificate. And we'll give everyone just about 10 more seconds to complete the second poll. All right, we'll close the poll and I will share the results. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ray.
Thank you. All right, so phenomenal number of people who are either have never tried it before but interested, 54%. Again, tried in the past or currently leveraging, 43%. I mean, the fact that only 3% don't feel they have a need today, it's probably the lowest poll number we've seen just yet. And that's indicative of the times that we're in. But clearly, we're happy to have you folks join us and learn more. And you never know when this kind of information is going to be valuable to help your firm. We've had firms jump on board with us for maybe for a test, and maybe they felt they had it covered going into tax season, but they understood what we offered, and suddenly something crazy happened. Maybe they lost a couple of staff, or maybe they lost some people that they weren't expecting to lose right at the beginning of tax season, and we've been able to come in and help them at that point. So it's good to know what options are out there, whether it's with us or anyone, and that's why we're doing this webinar. So each year we do an annual survey to our Expertex customers. We're trying to figure out exactly why they came on board with us. And we also want to know what in the long run is the benefits they're deriving from using us for this kind of work. And so typically we see a lot of the same thing. I mean, I will be honest with everybody. If there is very little chance that you're going to come on board with an outsourcing company unless you have some level of capacity issues or compression issues during tax season. And if those compression issues during tax season are leading to more staff retention problems, that's even more of a challenge that we can help you resolve. Because what we're trying to do is increase your capacity, We're trying to allow your staff to have a better work-life balance. Maybe they don't have to work as many hours during tax season. We want to give them an opportunity for growth so that perhaps maybe some of your senior preparers who are they're top talent who may be moving on to a manager role or senior manager role, they can review the work that we do and gives them a little bit more opportunity to work at the top of their license. And then of course, if we can get you your returns done in 24 hours and back to you in early in tax season, February, or sometime early February or late February, that gives you a better chance to get back to your client and maybe focus on some tax planning or some other things that you might be able to do for that client. But in the long run, what we hear the most, that when you add all of this in, the thing that our firms tell us every year is the benefit of using our service is providing their clients with better service. So when somebody always asks me, what am I going to tell my client, who might ask me why, they have to sign this 7216 and why are you sending this work to someone else? The easy answer to that is you're going to get much better client service. You're going to get your work done faster. You're still responsible for it, but that's what we hear the most. It's always about better client service. So speaking of better client service and results, I thought it would be pretty cool to share with everybody our tax season results from last year, this past tax season. So that would be January through May. I believe we extended through May 15th. And these are kind of the results we had. And most of it is focused on quality and turnaround time. And you can see some historical charts on the left, but I wanted to talk just about specific things that we saw during this past year. So our quality of the returns that we did, based on the results or based on information that from our client base, people calling us or sending emails to us saying this didn't come out right or whatever, it was 99.86%. We actually have an audit that will get deeper into the results that we do each year. So our team does its own audit of all of their tax returns that we did, just to check on, for our own purposes, what our results were. So 99.86% first level quality. Our turnaround time, and this is accurate, 99.81% of our returns were returned to the customer in less than, or to our firm in less than 48 hours. 94+% were returned in less than 24 hours. That's industry highs right there. Nobody can beat those kinds of turnaround times. No one has ever beat them. And right now we don't see any way anyone else can do that. So we kind of set the bar for turnaround time and quality, and we really enjoy being in that position. So when you think of Expatax, we're all about quality and we're all about turnaround time. We had several firms that exceeded their commitment, which basically means they needed more help from us, and they asked us if they could send us more returns, and we said yes. And that's also indicative of something that's going right. And the other thing that happened to us this past year, we had the most returns we've ever done since the inception of our Expatax outsourcing program, which was back in 2002. So we had our biggest year ever, and we're probably going to go much higher than that even this year. And the other thing that's happening is we're seeing business returns. As of the end of May, business returns were 16% of our total. I will guarantee you it's more like 20% after extension season. So during extension season, 50% of the returns we did were business returns. So when you look at the full year from tax season through extension, we're probably looking at 20, maybe even higher % of returns that are coming in as entity returns. So we're seeing an uptick in firms sending us those types of returns. Why do we do an audit? So it's very simple. We certainly want to know how we perform, but we also want to improve our service delivery. We want to improve the training for our preparers and our supervisors. And Dave will talk a little bit more about how we set up our teams. And then we also want to look at in-depth details of the kinds of errors that we saw. What were those errors? Where were they? What category would we find them in? And then we want to use that audit to help us identify future areas that we can train our team on so they can get better in those areas. And again, we're always looking to improve on our quality every year, especially, given the fact that we sometimes are going to be seeing significant tax law changes. So it's always important that we keep an eye on that. So when we look at the results of the audit, so the actual return accuracy dropped from 99.8 to 99.48%. So that was pretty much our accuracy on all information on tax returns. So that includes everything. It even includes things that may not have impacted the tax return itself. But for things that actually impacted the tax return, the mistakes that we made that actually impacted the tax returns, our accuracy was 99.76%. So again, I think it's important that we address probably one of the two most important things that we hear, and that is quality. And quality is so important to us. All right, so now that I've taken you through the paces of some of the information and some of the results from last year, I'm gonna let Dave Harris jump in and show us how we do that. How do we get to those kinds of turnarounds and quality? So Dave, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Ray. Yeah, so I'm gonna take you through a couple components today. We'll talk about building the capacity, kind of a team structure, highly skilled team, the process, and visibility within the XCM. So before I get into those slides, we are going to kick it off with a polling question. Melissa, turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Here's the third polling question. What is your primary reason for your interest in tax outsourcing? Tax season compression resulting in longer staff hours, cannot find staff to perform the work, staff turnover higher than past years, looking to spend more time on advisory work, or not interested right now but might be in the future. We'll give everyone about 15 more seconds to complete this polling question. As a reminder, you'll need to complete 3 of the 5 polling questions in order to receive your CPE. Just about 5 more seconds, and then we'll share the results. Okay, perfect. I will close the poll and share the results and turn it back over to you, Dave.
Great, thanks. All right, so taking a look at this, it looks like we're pretty consistent. 2 polls back, it was about can't find staff. Looks like that seems to be the remaining trend for this poll at 47%. And then compression. We all know we feel the compression, long staff hours as well. That compression comes down to, components of how do you move work through the process? And that's what we're here today to to show you in kind of detail of when you move information in tasks through the process fairly quickly, you can have a better year with reduced compression. Will it eliminate it? It might not eliminate it, but it's definitely going to reduce it. So if we now look at the building the capacity part, here's a team structure. This is a small team structure. We have supervisors, 2 preparers, training and development, senior managers. So if you come on board for about 100 returns, between 100 and 200 returns, a team structure looks like this. Call it a team of 4, where to the team of 3 really do the work. A supervisor, there's preparer 1, there'll also be an additional preparer, but then we also have a training and development individual as well that makes sure we stay in tune with the tax laws changes that happen. It feels like year over year, every day in terms of when that happens. So we just want to make sure we're trained, we're up to date to be able to provide the quality of our tax returns that's coming through the pipeline. And then alternatively on the next slide, we look at building that highly skilled team, right? What's our process? What do we look at? Certifications, training, how do we do that? And certainly we are hiring individuals that are going through a chartered accountancy program or come from the same profession from another company that might have been doing it for many years as well. So we do go through background checks, we do vet out the system. It's the same hiring process that we do right here in the US. Nothing's changed. They're tied to all of our procedures and agreements that we have in place. So just definitely a stringent selection process. Extensive training. Once we hire somebody, they don't come on board and jump right in. They do go through at least a 6-week program, if not 8 weeks, to be sure that they are up to speed on our processes using our technology and our tools, but we can't forget also the tax law and how it affects the tax return in today's world. So that's our hiring process as we go through and we find people. The next process really want to show you is how do you get information to us, okay? So really that's your clients provide you documents to the CPA firm, the firms that we have here today, and you take that and you provide that through XCM. XCM is our platform to provide that data. Once you provide us that data, our teams will access that data, prepare a return, and send you back that prepared return based on the information provided at that point. Okay, so that's the process. It comes back within 24 to 48 hours. Ray mentioned earlier the turnaround times are unbeatable, and there is a process and a way we get there, and it's certainly well valuable to all. We want to get that compression. We want to move things through the process. We want to get things done, quickly. Quality is certainly on there, but we want to move it with quality and quickness as well to keep things moving. And looking at how you do that, if we look at the platform, there is an area where you're going to provide us documents. If you see on the left, it says from firm. So those are the documents you provide to us. And then when we're done preparing a return based on the information, we provide documents back to you. Okay, so this is really helpful in terms of downloading information, putting it back into your system. You can refer to the information here as well from time to time as needed. So this is kind of the platform on where these things are being stored for the duration of an outsource period. Within our platform as well, you'll have visibility to what's going on with that task, okay? There are certain views. We have statuses. Is it going to be outsourced? Is it to be outsourced? Did we queue it up or did we not? Or there's one that says, oh, it's awaiting acceptance. Did it come back, okay? Then we have a view from an outsourced view. The team has it. What's going on with it and what status is it in? If we look at those statuses, returns might be in preparation, they might be in final review, they might be in bookmarking and send back. So if it goes to a period of cycles, it goes to a send back process as well. So you'll have up-to-date knowledge on what the status is of that return each day that you log in. Now, talking about the turnaround times that we have, for the most part, unless you're up really, really, really late, you're not really going to see it in the preparation status of the final review. Really what you're going to see is the OS awaiting bookmarking, and then you'll see it on the top back with the admin in an OS awaiting acceptance. And that really means that we went through our process, we went through the prep, we went through the final review, and now it's back to the firm for review. Now we're going to take a look at some work papers, kind of our structure and how we operate. Once we get a PDF file, we're going to go through and we are going to bookmark that file. After we bookmark that, we're going to go through and highlight the tax year. So once we highlight the tax year and click on the 2020, it's going to highlight that 2020 to show that we are using the correct data for the current year. We want to be sure that, we're not getting data for the prior year. We are also going through and we are highlighting the EIN numbers. So when we highlight the EIN numbers, we're matching up to the taxpayer information, right, into the tax return that we're looking at from the prior year as a verification to be sure we're using the correct taxpayer. Dual household, maybe there's other information that got caught up in the mail, caught up in the package, that might go along with it, and certainly that should not be in the package and to be included in the return. So it's a quality control with that as well. After that highlight, then we also have a hyperlink identified by a blue box. That hyperlink is going to bring you to the page on where we found that $3,400 again. So we found it in two places. So it's $33.99 within an organizer. Someone put it in. It's highlighted by the AT&T. So let's highlight that. And with that, now once we verify that, we have sign-offs. Sign-offs in the right-hand side highlighted down below to your right. Once we have that sign off, you can sign off on blue from a firm. And if you look to the left, the bookmark turns that color of your sign off. So now's a good time to indicate that if you look on the left-hand side, all the bookmarks are green. And if you look on the right-hand side, there's a preparer and a reviewer. Those two sign-offs are for the Expatax team. The preparer is going to sign off in red. The reviewer is going to sign off in green. Once the reviewer signs off on all of the pages in the PDF, all of the bookmarks will turn color to that corresponding check mark. Same from a firm reviewer. Once you sign off on the pages, all of the bookmarks will turn to that color of blue. So that way you know you've reviewed every single page within the PDF. Now, in addition to the PDF, let's take that same $33.99 that I'm going to highlight right here, and we prepare an Excel document. The Excel document is a summary of all of the information in the PDF file. And it will, if you see down below that I'll highlight the $33.99, that's where we're putting that into the Excel spreadsheet. Now, if we look at the top of that column, now I'm going to highlight the page number 13. What we do is we hyperlink that cell to the page number in the bookmark PDF file. So when you click on that 13, it is to pop up the PDF and bring you to that page, have you verify that $33.99. Once you do, you'll have the sign off same capabilities that I'll highlight on the right hand side, and then it'll be a sign off. And then when you do the sign off, it'll turn the bookmark to the left in blue, and that will bring you to your verification that you're reviewed and sign off. Additionally, we have further tabs within the workbook. So here's a couple of screenshots of all of the tabs that we have. We have more tabs, but I took 3 of the major ones: the dividends, the K1s, the 1099s. So ordinary dividends, right? So we're going to have that because it's coming from a brokerage statement possibly, or another 1099 that's separate. Then we'll alternatively, same, Schedule K1, we have ordinary dividends, so we'll take that amount. So these two are areas here that we were capturing the ordinary dividends. And then third, from a brokerage statement. So it's coming in all different areas, as we all know. It doesn't just come on one form. If it did, that might be great. But we have K1s, we got 1099s, we got brokerage statements. All of those tabs will then roll up to a control sheet, and that control sheet will have a total of all of those items that we identified in each one of those tabs. And that's how we go through the review, the sign-offs as well on our end. And when you get it, those amounts should tie out to those page numbers of the tax return. Okay, let's take a look at some of the tax software we use. Certainly we use the Wolters Kluwer products, ProFX, Access, Tax Prep. Tax Prep is a Canada product. We do Canadian returns as well, T1s, T2s, Thomson Reuters products, and so on and so on. So if you do use one of these products and you're not using the CCH products, for an offshore outsourcing, we can utilize another tax vendor that we have available to you. If we look at the implementation part, it comes down to 4 steps. Here's 4 items here, but we really talked about the participation, the firm members, who's going to be doing or assisting with the sending and receiving of information returns. We talked about consents later on down the line as well. Ray's going to go into that. How are we going to distribute the consent forms? Are we going to do it with a consent letter? Are we going to do it electronically? Are we going to do it digitally? Are we going to do it by traditional mailing and paper? And then the timing. The timing of that is key as well. You certainly want to start to send that communication early and create multiple times to send that distribution consent before you really get into the heat of tax season. If it's something that you're looking at to do and you decide that at the end of January and February, maybe after your first communication has gone out, well, then now you have to send another communication to your client, and you really only have one chance to get that consent form signed. Okay, so we go through that process in the implementation. Communication, what's the communication going to be like within the firm? Does the firm know? Do we need to in tune everyone? Kind of roll out that process of what tax season is going to look like with an outsourced affiliate. And then lastly, we go through training through the XCM application, what the workflow looks like, sending and receiving again of that information when we identify the participation, the first step, the firm members, who are they and who do we need to train, and kind of work through that process. Training of the work papers, it's almost identical to what those previous slides I just showed for the work papers. You know, that's really the highlight of the work papers, just to show you what it's going to look like when you get it back. How do you utilize it? There's not a lot of tools worked into there. We don't want to make it overwhelming. There's a couple of tools, just like I mentioned in the previous slides on that work paper presentation, and that's kind of what the work papers are ultimately going to look like when you get it back. Okay. All right, so that's the implementation training. The next part is gaining firm buy-in, and I will turn it over to Ray.
Thanks, Dave. All right, before we get further into gaining firm buy-in, I have another poll for everybody. Alyssa?
Great, thank you. I will launch poll number 4, and it is, what is your biggest challenge to obtaining firm buy-in for outsourcing? Don't want to have to deal with the 7216 client consent, quality of tax preparation service, loss of control of the return, security of client information, or partner objection. We'll give everyone just about 20 more seconds to complete the polling question. Just about 10 more seconds. And as a reminder, this is poll number 4. You'll need to complete 3 of the 5 polling questions in order to receive CPE. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them into the questions pane of the control panel, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation if there's time. All right, so I will close the poll and share the results and turn it back over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Alyssa. So we picked these questions or these answers based on feedback over the years in working with the accounting profession. We're not surprised that a lot of people do not want to deal with the 7216 client consent. That's why we still offer domestic outsourcing. If that is such a huge roadblock in your firm, then perhaps the right course of direction for your firm would be to move towards a domestic answer. But we also know that a lot of firms start off as domestic outsourcing and over time become international outsourcing customers. The primary reason is our quality, our turnaround time, and the ability really to provide a much lower price per return to the firm from us. So we know it's a big challenge. We know you don't want to necessarily have to deal with this, but we have some stats that might be able to help you a little bit, and I'll go through some of those in a little bit. But 37% don't want to deal with the 7216, no surprise. And there's other things, quality. There's always a concern about quality, and there should be. This is an important piece of the process. We're doing the heavy lifting, data entry, and preparation work for you. And you want it to be done right. So we totally get that. So I titled this Myths Around Outsourcing. It's really more about myths and things we've heard about international outsourcing, and also some of them are more related to domestic outsourcing as well. So they're both. But the first thing we hear is employee perception. We very rarely hear that anymore, especially today. It used to be a big deal. Employees were worried about losing their jobs. And so we really don't see that as a big challenge anymore. And it's easy enough to overcome that challenge if you have it. Basically, you're going to give them a much better work-life balance and less tax season compression. The second one, the biggest one we get, is client perception. And again, you know, this is your business. This is your client. You're advising them. You still own the return. You still own the review. You're still responsible for the e-filing of that review. And most of the top, several of the top 100 firms that we work with also have their own operation, offshore operation as well, a lot of them in India. So it's no longer a big challenge for firms to be talking to clients about how they're going to offer them better client service by outsourcing some of the work that's being done. And I'm going to show you a couple of letters, at least one letter from a firm that did just that, and we can walk through that so you get a pretty good feel for how it's positioned. Security, we have had very good success with our SOC 2 audit. It continues to be something that we're very proud of. We have controls, we have confidentiality, and none of the data that's housed in our data centers leaves the US. Literally, our team in India reaches into our data center from India to pull the return information up and begin that process. We don't download anything. None of the terminals that they use have disk space in them. We don't print anything. They don't have any printers in their workstation. So basically, none of the data leaves the US. The other one, partner perception. Yeah, we're gonna have partners who basically are not gonna buy into this. They're gonna say, my client would never go for this. And that's okay. We hear that all the time too. But you know what happens? Some partners do buy in. They begin doing this. The other partners see the realization as a result of doing this, and they jump on board. And soon after, the firm makes a significant strategic decision to ensure that everybody is using some level of the outsourcing services, because it's providing a relief of the compression to tax season. It's providing an economic value, and today it's solving your capacity challenges. Quality. I've talked a lot about quality. We're so confident in our quality. We want to stand by our quality, and we will provide references on our quality. You can call anybody you want, and we will back up our quality 100%. Loss of control. We feel that XCM Workflow provides you with all of the information you need to know exactly where that return is at all times. And you have the ability to communicate back and forth with the supervisors that are responsible for those returns. If you want to make a change, if you want to pull back a return, whatever you want to do, you have that capability leveraging XCM Workflow, or even email if that's a better and faster way to do it. So we feel that much of these myths have been it's been around for a while, but we feel pretty strongly that we can work around and get people to see the value of moving from domestic to international. But if you don't, domestic is just fine. It's just that you have to remember, domestic is we have the same people that we're recruiting that you do, tax preparers. So the costs are high. The turnaround may not be as quick because we're trying to find people just like you are. And so basically the talent pool is not as strong domestically as we have internationally. So that's one of the reasons. And we talked about our SOC 2. A lot of people may ask for a copy of this deck, and we can certainly provide that, but this is where we've been. We just got our 2021 SOC certification approved. So it's really 6 years now. So we feel pretty good about that. Dave mentioned the 7216 consent form. For those who may not know, and I'm sure most of you know, this is what the AICPA put out as their interpretation. And basically it says you have to disclose to your client for any of the 1040 family, 1040, 1040NR, I don't even think there's an EZ anymore. But those require a specific written consent from the client. And basically it has to be in a particular format, a particular font, a particular letterhead. Everything has to be exactly the way the IRS stipulated. The difference for entity returns is there still has to be some level of disclosure, but you don't have to disclose it in that same format that the 1040s are. So you can use any format you want to disclose an entity return to your client. It could be part of just a normal engagement letter that you send out. So that's the way the AICPA has interpreted this. We always say you should check with your legal counsel or internal inside counsel to make sure that you've got this correct. As far as the client toolkit we provide, we've been doing this for a long time. We have the actual letter that needs to be prepared and sent to the customer. That's the letter to the right here, the consent. We also have a cover letter that we can provide as well. And I have an actual sample on the next slide of a cover letter we worked with for one of our customers, and they actually put this cover letter on their website for their customers to view. And it's well written, and I think it's worked out well for them. So this is just an example of what you would have to do for a 7216. I will tell you that the distribution method, the best practice we see for distribution of these 7216 consent forms is through some sort of a digital signature program. I don't care which one it is, quite frankly. As long as you do it with a digital signature, you're probably going to get 80% response rate, positive response rate. You'll probably get 15% of your customers who won't respond because probably they don't respond to anything. And then maybe 2 to 5% might ask you why. Why are you doing this? And then we can help you with the talking points on that. But the most important thing is you don't have to do it for them. If they're so objected to having their return sent offshore, then don't do it. You're going to have plenty of other customers that are okay with it. And so we typically want to see that digital signature. If you send it by mail, physically mail, you're probably looking at a 30% response rate. Maybe email will get you a 50% response rate, but digital signatures typically get you the best response rates. And that's one of the things that Dave works with firms as we implement, we could take them through the implementation process. What's the best way to get those 7216 forms signed positively and so that you can move forward. The other thing we talk about is, I don't know if you can see this here, but there's a place on the form to identify the length of the signature. In other words, how long is this valid for? If you don't put a date on it, it's valid for 1 year and you got to go back and get it signed again every year. You can put a date that keeps this consent valid for up to 10 years. So a lot of firms do 5 years, but you have the option to put on this consent form that it's valid for up to 10 years. So you can put an actual date when the consent is no longer valid. So that saves you the time of having to do this year after year. And it also makes it easier to make decisions on which firms you're gonna, or which companies or clients you're gonna outsource with. So that's another best practice that we see. So this is an example of a cover letter that a client is using, one of our customers is using, and you can see basically I've covered up the name, but it starts out really talking to the client about they want to go beyond the numbers, and they're looking at more efficient and effective ways to do the work on their behalf. But the most important thing is this box here where it says, let us be very clear, your tax return preparation and review will continue to be completed by an experienced member of the XYZ CPA firm, and your return will be signed by a member of our firm. We simply use Expertex to perform basic data entry in an effort to streamline the process. And then they go into all of the things that the relationship with Expertex, the due diligence that they've done to ensure that this company is going to provide the kind of quality and security that is important to the client. So this is just a way of assuring your client that, hey, you have done the due diligence and you've made that decision, and they should have as much confidence as you do in having their return outsourced. And the last slide I have before our last question, our last poll, is around building your strategy. We spend a lot of time talking about the strategy that you folks are trying to accomplish, and outsourcing has become very strategic in most cases, and for some firms it's almost so strategic that they couldn't do without it anymore. And in order for them to grow and to grow revenue and to continue to grow the way they want to grow, outsourcing has become one of the most strategic initiatives that they have. This is clear to me. I hear it from managing partners every day. I don't care what size firm you are. Our firms range from top 100 firms all the way down to sole practitioners, to firms. And the reason some of those firms may be sole practitioners is because they only work with clients. We do all of their back office work, whether it's preparing returns, doing accounting work, whatever it might be. And all they do is maybe they review the returns and e-file them, and then they work with their clients. So the size of the firm doesn't matter to us. We have We have a variety of firms that do business with us for a variety of reasons. But the one main reason they're looking at us today is that this is a strategic initiative within the firm. So the first thing that you need to be able to do is evaluate the situation. What kind of work do you want to redistribute? Which type of returns do you want to send us? Most firms don't want to send us the least complex return, or those they like to say for their interns, because a lot of firms still work with us and are still bringing interns on board. So maybe what we would consider the least complex returns would go to the interns. A lot of firms are sending us kind of their level 2 and 3 returns, maybe returns that it consists of anywhere from 15 to, I don't know, 125 pages. That's the majority of the returns we get. And then we also get business returns, and we get 1040 returns. Business returns are usually earlier in the year, and then the compression really starts on 1040s as we get closer to the beginning of April. Which clients do you want to send to outsourcing? There are some clients that perhaps the fees aren't as high as you want. We've seen this happen before, where a firm merges in another firm, and maybe some of their clients are not exactly in the fee structure that aligns with the current fee structure in the firm that acquired. So instead of jettisoning those clients, they send them to outsourcing to get the tax work done, and that keeps their costs down. So that's another value that we see. And then making that decision, international or domestic. If you're going international, make sure you have that 7216 sign. If you're going domestic, you don't. XCM workflow, it's a pull down menu. Do you want to go domestic or do you want to go international? You just pull down the menu, choose which direction you want the return to go, and it's sent to the right processing area. So it's not a problem. And it's usually done by the coordinator. So typically we have an outsourced coordinator who's responsible for making those decisions as to which direction the returns go. So you want to make sure you have that coordinator there. It doesn't have to be a CPA, or it could be an admin person or anyone like that. And how are you going to track those consent forms? We have the ability to track them in XCM, so a lot of firms do that. But you want to make sure before you send a return offshore that you have a consent on file. And then who will determine which returns are sent? Is that a decision? Does the partner make the decision, send this client offshore? Is it a decision made by someone else in the firm that is aware of the commitments that you've made to us in terms of number of returns, and all of that is able? So that's another thing. And the last thing I talk about is, what will you do differently? I mean, I don't know, we often say the minimum number of returns we're going to take is 100, because we think that will make a difference, whether it's one full staff person or some level of staff required. When we say what will you do differently, we would hope that it would give your staff a little bit more freedom during tax season. Maybe you would have to hire less interns, or maybe you would have to hire one less staff person. Whatever it is, what is it that you can look back on and say, you know what, we worked with Expatax this year, we did 150 returns or whatever, and because we did that, we did this changed for us, whether it's our realization, whether it's our staffing, whether the hours during peak season, something changed, and now if we continue in that direction, we can continue to add returns we can continue to add returns, and we'll continue to see a value in working with them. So many of our customers come on board with a smaller amount of returns, maybe 100, 150, 300, and then they grow and they add more. They move up to 750, to 1,000, to 1,500, to even higher than that. So it's a strategic decision. It's an opportunity to continue to get used to the process, and once you do that, you can grow with us, and that's a big part of what we do. On to our last poll. I am running up against time, Alyssa.
Great, thank you. We'll launch the last polling question. It's, would you like to learn more about Expatax outsourcing? And I know there's been a great amount of questions that have come in. We certainly will not be able to get to everyone's question in this minute remaining, but we will have your representative reach out to you to get your questions answered. While we do have a minute left, we'll answer a few questions. There's been several people have asked about pricing, and if you could provide some details on pricing.
So when we first sign someone up on pricing, we ballpark their cost, because it depends on which type of returns you send, but we ballpark your price at about $192 per return. If I took the entire base of all of the expert tax returns we do and looked at the average fee per return, and that would include business returns, complex returns, everything that we do for our firms, the average price comes in at somewhere around $225 per return. But that always depends on the types of returns you're going to send us. And so we ballpark it at 192 when we're trying to determine the number of returns you're going to do and the commitment level.
Great, thank you. As we have reached the top of the hour, unfortunately, we will not be able to answer any further questions on the webinar, but as I mentioned, we will have someone certainly reach out to you to get your questions answered. So I'll turn it back over to Ray and Dave for any closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And we will get back to you with all these questions that you have, and we'll make sure those questions are responded as quickly as possible. And if you do want a copy of this deck, please follow Alyssa's instructions, and we'll send you a PDF of what we presented today. And again, thanks, everyone. David?
Yeah, no other comments. Thanks for wrapping that up, Ray. It's enjoyable to present what we had today. Looking forward to working with each one of you in an outsourced process. So thanks for attending and have a wonderful day.
Great, thank you. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please feel free to email marketing@xstamsolutions.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.